My friend brought up a good point, which I feel like we may disagree a little bit upon. He was saying that the claim that Jesus led a perfect life, sinless life, isn't really met by the evidence, even of the Gospels, because they don't account for every single moment of his life, which you claim to be ridiculous, but given the extraordinary claim, it seems like that's what's required in order to have a justified belief in that.
Well, I think you're making the same mistake that Descartes made. Descartes was trying to say that unless I can believe something is true, you have to be able to prove it to me. I think that's a ridiculously naive approach to truth and to life. Sir, I can prove almost nothing. But that doesn't mean I can't make decisions. I make decisions based on evidence, not proof. And I think if you look at your life, you're no different from me.
Well, I'm a little bit different than you, but...
Yeah, well, obviously you're a little different from me. And you're fortunate that you are different from me in certain ways, okay? So, I mean, I pray you'll come to put your faith in Christ, but I don't pray that you be just exactly like me. That would not be good in all situations, I can promise you. But I think if you look at your life, you've got to acknowledge, I cannot base my life on proof. I base my life on evidence. I mean, if you're in ROTC, can you prove to me the United States government is not going to rip you off? No. If you're paying the University of Arizona lots of money to enroll here, can you prove to me that on your day of graduation, the University of Arizona is going to grant you a diploma? Maybe on your day of graduation, the University of Arizona is going to say, hey, you know something? Let's break tradition. No diplomas this year.
Oh, no.
It's possible, right? Anything's possible. But the reason you're so committed to this fine institution is because the evidence is you complete your courses and you'll get a diploma. You don't prove it, but the evidence points in that direction.
Yeah, but it's not so much a solid something that's akin to a mathematical proof. It's more the ability to disprove it. For example, you don't need, if I were to make the claim that I had a perfect life, you wouldn't need an entire count because you would just be able to say, oh, I saw you trip an old lady yesterday, or something like that.
Good point.
It seems like if we're going to have little bits and pieces of Jesus' life missing here, especially that 30 years of the gap in the Gospels, there's a very good possibility that he could have sinned or whatever, or erred in some way.
Theoretically, it's possible, I agree. But I can promise you, sir, if I live with you closely for 3 years, and if I never see you sin once, that's going to blow me out of the water. I'm going to be really impressed.
Or I just sin behind your back, too. But I know what you mean.
Well, I mean, if I track with you, if we're close friends, like if we're roommates for 4 years at the University of Arizona, and if I never see you sin once, you're always compassionate, always honest. Your integrity is pure and spotless. I mean, that's pretty incredible. I'm going to be blown out of the water by you. That's incredibly fine.
Yeah, and that sounds good, but what I'm saying is that that's a good bit of inductive reasoning, but I don't think that's enough reasoning to back up the claim that he led a perfect life.
All right. But you see, when other people say to me, I've never sinned, their friends laugh. There was one student at MIT who raised his hand and he said, Cliff, I've never sinned once. Well, I stood there with a poker face, but all of his classmates burst into laughter. So when Jesus makes this claim that he's a sinless life, I mean, why doesn't everybody break out laughing? What kind of an idiot are you, Christ, claiming to be a sinless person? And yet they didn't break out in laughter. Instead they said, yeah, the guy lived a sinless life.
But I don't think so other people didn't laugh. I don't think that's good reason to believe him. I mean, maybe they're just really gullible.
Yeah, maybe they are gullible. That's a possibility.
It is, and we have all these possibilities of it turning out that he didn't lead a perfect life. So
you bet.
I don't think the belief is justified.
Okay, but when you read the Gospels, you're right, I'm looking for gullibility. And when you read the Gospels, you'll notice his bravest follower, Peter, denies knowing him 3 times. Is that gullibility? Is that blind faith? No. Peter believed in Christ, but he also doubted. He doubted to the point of denying he even knew Christ 3 times. You read the Gospels and you bump into a guy named Thomas. And yeah, Thomas was one of the 12 apostles. But Jesus was such an ineffective communicator that when the other apostles said, hey, Thomas, Jesus is risen from the dead, Thomas said, no, I don't believe it. Not unless I can see it with my own eyes. Not unless I can take my hands and put them in the nail prints in his hands will I believe. Well, I like that. That's like me. I doubt. But when the evidence is consistently pointing in a direction, I got to follow the evidence. So you're right, it's possible that these little 12 apostles were blind, gullible puppies, blindly following this heroic Jesus of Nazareth. But when you read about how they responded to Jesus, you can't conclude that. They denied him, they doubted him. Judas Iscariot, one of his 12 closest friends, betrayed him for 30 pieces of silver. These are not blind, true believers. These are skeptics. They're Christ doubters, Christ deniers. Well, guess what, guys? I like that, because that's the way I am. But I can promise you that ups the credibility of the Gospels, because they're recording all the doubts, all the skepticism.
Well, if you're going to bring in the credibility of the Gospels, I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit before. I don't find them to be very credible. I mean,
why?
Okay, yeah, like, I mean, last night you said it's not like telephone, but I feel that it really is like telephone.
How?
So we have information starting at one point, it's passing through certain people. Let's say it's 8 people or something like that. Even then, it tends to get misinterpreted, changed a little bit, or something like that.
Sure.
So if we have something like that, I'm not going to believe that the information is the same as the original point. So if we change it to eyewitness testimony and things like that over a few thousand years, I'm not sure if I'm going to believe that anymore.
Okay.
Especially given that a lot of the things in the Bible seem to be Jesus talking, which is a very specific event. And that doesn't seem like a very credible thing to me, that they were able to replicate exactly what he said, if he even said it to begin with. Because, for example, miraculous things were written about Alexander the Great, but I don't believe those either. But even then, those weren't on the small scale of everyday conversations between people. Those are about actual major events. So if I'm not going to believe the major events, which seem miraculous, why do I believe the Gospels, which were small events? That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
But Alexander the Great never claimed to be God in human form. He never claimed to be a prophet of God. Obviously, Alexander the Great claimed to be a very committed general, leader of an army. And he was obviously a tremendously successful, talented general, leader of armies. And so history chronicles how he led those armies to victory after victory after victory. Now, when myths grow up around Alexander the Great or around George Washington about him throwing $1 across the Potomac or whatever, because you study the literary style, and when these myths grew up and you begin to study folklore, you begin to realize, no, George Washington wasn't this mythological figure who did all these things. He was a real historical person, and this is what he did. And then look at how the myth grew up around him, or Alexander the Great. But with Jesus Christ, you don't have an historical person who myth grows up around. Instead, you've got this historical person claiming to be God in human form, and right from the get-go, he's performing miracles. And these miracles are not added to his life later on to give it some zest and some punch and some persuasiveness. See, Acts chapter 2 records Peter standing up 50 days after the resurrection. Peter looks into the face of his listeners and says, "You killed the Christ. God raised him from the dead, and we are all eyewitnesses of this fact." And the people don't say, "Oh, no, you're wrong. Christ didn't rise from the dead." People knows the facts. And the facts is, these people claim to have seen Christ risen from the dead. This is 50 days after the resurrection, and Peter's going head to head with them. Nobody can say, "Oh, no, we found the dead body. Oh, no, we know about the plot." No, they can't. Right from the get-go, the eyewitness testimony is, we saw Christ dead, we saw him risen from the dead, you guys killed him, he's the Christ, he's the Son of the Blessed.
Yeah, that's my point. It's eyewitness testimony for something that isn't physically possible. I mean, a miracle.
There you go.
And there are other things. I mean, so first you have to, just like you said last night, you have to accept a supernatural being in order to accept a supernatural occurrence. And it seems a little circular. You have to accept supernatural before you accept supernatural claims.
Well, no, it's not circular. In order for a miracle to happen, there has to be a supernatural God. Obviously, if there's no supernatural God, it is impossible for a miracle to happen, right? Because if there's no supernatural God, all of reality is natural order. And you don't have a miracle occurring in natural order. Right? So in order to have a miracle, you've got to have a supernatural God who chooses to change a natural law. All right, what is Jesus doing when he's turning water into wine? He's changing a law. And the law is not that water never turns into wine. Obviously, water does turn into wine, but it goes through a process of being in a grape and then fermenting. Obviously, Jesus is speeding up that natural process, and he's turning water directly into wine. Obviously, when Jesus walks on water, you don't do that. Why? Because gravity pulls you right down into water. He's changing a natural law. He's a supernatural God. Obviously, when Jesus raises a dead person to life, he's changing a natural law. So obviously, the only way a miracle can happen is if there's a supernatural God who created these natural laws in the first place, and then he's got the power to change these natural laws. That's why you have to figure out, does the evidence point to a supernatural God existing, or does it not? And if you conclude there's no supernatural God because there's no evidence to support a supernatural God, then obviously Jesus did not rise from the dead, because it's impossible, if there's no supernatural God, for a dead person to rise from the dead. It's impossible.
What's the evidence of the soul? What's your evidence of the soul?
My evidence for a soul is free will, love, conscience, independent rational mind.
How do you test for this?
I test for it by self-reflection, judging myself, analyzing myself, saying, Cliff, when you did that, that was boneheaded. When you did this, that was good.
How do you know that's the soul and not just some mistake you're making or some emotional thing? How do you know it's the soul?
Well, we don't have to call it a soul. It's me. It's me that goes beyond my chemical drive. I have a sex drive. Now, I don't have to do whatever my sex drive tells me. 3 years ago, I was speaking out here, and there was a guy right over here who said, yes, I date rape. And I don't think it's wrong. I said, okay, fine. Why don't you think date rape is wrong? He said, because I have a very high testosterone level. And you see, he was being consistent with his worldview that said, I don't have a soul. I don't have a free will. I just do what my genetic makeup programs me to do. My experience is, I have sexual desires, and I don't have to put them into practice. I can control them. My experience is, I really hate some people who've treated me rather despicably, but I don't have to continue to hate them. I can choose to forgive them. Now, to be honest with you, Benjamin, at times I've hated them, and I'm embarrassed by that. But I know that I've also been able to change, and with the help of Christ, love people who naturally I would hate. Let me give you one quick example. I went to college to play major college basketball down in North Carolina. But there was an assistant basketball coach who would stand on the sidelines, and every time I'd make a bad pass, every time I'd make a bad shot, he would mock me. Look at the chicken out there. Knechtle, can't play ball worth squat. My teammates would come to me and say, Cliff, what have you done against this guy? Did he treat you like a piece of dirt? And I'd say, I don't know. But I can promise you, Benjamin, I had some major bitterness and hatred towards that guy. I tried to love him, Benjamin. I tried to care about the guy. I failed time and time again. I hated his guts. If he would have died, I would have been celebrating at his funeral, to tell you the truth. And it wasn't until I reached the point where I said, Christ, I need your help. I tried to love the guy and I failed repeatedly. And Christ helped me to love a man who I hated on my own.
You know, I've had similar hatred toward people, but I've been able to restrain myself without the belief in Christ.
Good.
You know, through ethical measures.
And isn't that your free will? Isn't that the real Benjamin choosing not to hate?
I guess, but it's constrained, by certain events.
Right.
It's not just, something I feel that I was born with this, to not go kill this guy or whatever.
When certain people have hurt me very deeply, my knee-jerk response is to hit him as hard as I can. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to deliberate about it. If someone cuts me off at the knees, my knee-jerk reaction is, I'm going to cut you off at the knees.
That's not my knee-jerk reaction.
Okay? Good. Well, that's great. But, Benjamin, I think if you look over your life with a fine-tooth comb, you'll have to acknowledge that too frequently your knee-jerk reaction has been selfishness, thoughtlessness.
Doubt it, no.
Oh, come on,
Not so much. Of course, there's selfishness here and there, but as a whole, no. I would say the majority is not selfishness. Maybe some people are like that, but you can't take one person and assume the entire species is like that. So.
Benjamin, I used to think that I was a really selfless guy. Then I got married. And I can promise you, Benjamin, being married to a woman showed me very clearly how selfish I am. Then I thought I got over my selfishness. Then we had 3 boys. Then I really found out how selfish I am. Human selfishness is deeply ingrained.